top assassin, once capable of assassinating a president, now found himself hanging from the rafters like a petty thief. With only 4 days left until his next mission, Jacko was desperately searching for a way to escape when the burly man suddenly released him and motioned for him to leave. But just as Jacko stood up, the burly man spotted the sniper rifle hidden in the haystack. This time, escape seemed impossible. The burly man forced Jacko back to his house, ignoring Jacko's repeated gestures offering money to settle the matter. However, due to the language barrier, the burly man couldn't understand Jacko except for the word euro. Thinking he could make a fortune, the man immediately called his brother, bragging that he had caught a foreigner with a strange weapon that looked like high-tech equipment. He was convinced the foreigner was talking about money, and he and his brother could surely profit from the situation. Among the workers at the brothers' farm, there was a man named Laszlo who could speak English. Laszlo came to talk to Jacko and learned that Jacko was indeed willing to pay to resolve the issue. Laszlo relayed this to the elder brother, who, motivated by the philosophy of never leaving money on the table, grabbed a weapon and prepared to head to his younger brother's farm. However, before he could get far, he was stopped by the police. The officer informed him that a foreign assassin had been spotted nearby and warned him to stay away from the man because he was extremely dangerous. Hearing this, the elder brother realized that his payday was just around the corner. But what he didn't know was that death itself was already waiting for him. Back at the farm, while waiting for his brother to arrive, the burly man kept forcing Jacko to try bread he had baked himself. Jacko, still searching for a chance to escape, suddenly found the opportunity presenting itself. As Jacko gathered his belongings and prepared to slip away, the elder brother called the burly man, but the call went unanswered. He left a voicemail warning his younger brother to be cautious because the foreigner was extremely dangerous. Little did he know, his younger brother had already taken his last breath. Jacko stepped outside and climbed into a truck, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get it to start. Reluctantly, he switched to another vehicle. Just as he inserted the key, the elder brother appeared. While the two brothers searched the house, Jacko quickly started the truck. The roar of the engine echoed, prompting the elder brother to rush out of the house and fire his gun at Jacko. At the critical moment, Jacko finally managed to get the truck running, but unable to lift his head to see the road, he crashed the vehicle into a pile of tires, leaving it stuck. Seeing this, the elder brother charged forward, intent on avenging his sibling. But when he opened the truck door, Jacko was gone. A gunshot suddenly rang out from beneath the vehicle, and Jacko coldly rose to his feet, his face emotionless as Laszlo looked on in horror. Without hesitation, Jacko finished off the elder brother. Summoning all his courage, Laszlo stepped forward, but his gun was loaded with blanks. How could he stand a chance against Jacko? With no choice, Laszlo dropped his weapon and found himself a hostage. If Jacko hadn't needed a driver and translator, Laszlo would have been dead already. With a gun pressed against him, Laszlo shakily drove the truck, watching flocks of birds scatter in panic through the window. Regret consumed him as he thought about the 100 million contract he had agreed to, but now there was no turning back. His only option was to survive this nightmare somehow. Jacko grabbed Laszlo's phone. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to call his wife. His voice trembled with emotion as he told her he was in serious trouble. He confessed that this might be their last conversation and urged her to take care of their son. "I love them so much," he said. It should have been a call filled with sorrow and despair. After this heartfelt call, Jacko felt a heavy weight in his chest. He knew his life was inching closer to its end. Not only would he have to face death, but he would also have to endure the thought of his loved ones living with pain and loss. However, Jacko wasn't someone who gave up easily. He began strategizing his next moves, determined to find a way out of this dangerous predicament. Laszlo continued driving, his hands trembling as he tried to steady himself. Each rumble of the engine or the sound of Jacko's movements behind him sent waves of fear coursing through his body. He felt as though he was being driven into a tunnel with no escape. His heart pounded and chaotic thoughts swirled in his mind. But for now, all he could do was follow Jacko's orders, clinging to the faint hope that he might stay alive just a little longer. The truck sped along deserted roads, cutting through dense, desolate forests. Laszlo didn't dare glance into the rearview mirror, knowing Jacko's sharp gaze was fixed on his every move. Exhaustion began to creep over Laszlo, but he forced himself to stay focused, determined not to make a single mistake. Suddenly, the truck turned onto a narrow road, leading to a remote area. Jacko signaled Laszlo to stop. Laszlo glanced over his shoulder and saw Jacko holding a gun, his face cold and emotionless. This was the moment Jacko would decide Laszlo's fate. "Get out," Jacko ordered, his voice deep and commanding. Laszlo didn't dare resist and stepped out of the truck as instructed. Meanwhile, Jacko kept the gun aimed at him, his eyes never leaving the target. "Don't make me use the bullets," Jacko warned, his voice steady and unwavering. Laszlo knew that if he didn't comply, his chances of survival would be zero. Obediently, he moved carefully, not daring to make any sudden movements, hoping to get through this dangerous ordeal. "Now drive," Jacko ordered again. Laszlo returned to the truck, and their journey resumed. Every sound in the air grew heavy with tension. Jacko held Laszlo as a hostage, but deep down, he wasn't sure how much longer he could maintain control over the situation. Everything seemed to be slowly spiraling out of control. At this moment, Laszlo felt like a leaf caught in the wind, powerless to do anything but accept his fate. He thought of his family, of the life he once had, and realized how quickly everything could change in an instant. But if he wanted to live, he had only one option: to keep following Jacko's orders and hope for some kind of miracle. After finishing his call with his wife, Jacko felt a glimmer of newfound hope. His wife hadn't panicked. Instead, she directly asked where he was and what she could do to help. That question filled Jacko with a surge of strength. Without hesitation, he instructed his wife to bring him a suitcase. She didn't doubt him for a moment. She still believed her husband was merely a business operative, and she just wanted him to complete his mission and return home safely. After the call, Laszlo drove Jacko to the city. Hearing the news of a wanted man on the radio, and seeing police cars racing by with sirens blaring, Jacko sank deep into thought. Elsewhere, Foster received a report and arrived at the scene of the murders at the farm. The police informed her they had found fingerprints matching those from a previous hideout of Norman, confirming that the fugitive was Jacko. But just as Foster prepared to continue the pursuit, she received orders from her superiors to return to headquarters to oversee the operation to capture Jacko. The operation was named Anubis. This unintended delay provided Jacko with a window to escape. Laszlo had saved Jacko's life with a single line: "You don't seem like a bad guy." That sentence replayed in Jacko's mind, stirring something within him. It reminded him of the brutal years that had passed, the missions where he had ceased to be a good man, becoming nothing more than a cold-blooded assassin. But now, those memories made him hesitate. Jacko ordered Laszlo to stop the car under a bridge and instructed him to place his hands on the steering wheel. Laszlo hesitated, torn over whether to pull the trigger, but when he glanced at the family photo on his phone, he thought of his wife and children. In the end, Jacko broke the assassin's code. He only threatened Laszlo, warning him that if he betrayed him, Jacko would come after his family. After that, Jacko left no trace behind and disappeared quickly. He laughed loudly, as if having just narrowly escaped death, and melted into the crowd. He called his wife, instructing her not to contact him anymore but to wait for his email. After the call, he dropped the phone into a passerby's backpack and stepped into an internet cafe. There, he logged onto a secure website to contact his handler. The woman on the other end told Jacko that the Budapest incident had drawn too much attention and the higher-ups had lost faith in him. Jacko responded firmly, promising to make good on his word. However, he warned that if they dared to cheat him out of his payment, they shouldn't blame him for turning against them. When Jack received an email from his wife, he immediately replied with a hotel link. His wife hurried from the airport with a suitcase and met him at the hotel. Though she still harbored some resentment, seeing the remorse in Jacko's eyes, she chose forgiveness without saying much. Jacko had already begun to change his appearance, and inside the suitcase his wife brought were the tools he needed for his disguise. She silently stood by, trying to understand more about her husband's line of work. After transforming into an elderly man, Jacko and his wife headed to the airport together. Security personnel seemed to pay them no mind. After a heartfelt goodbye to his wife, Jacko departed alone. Meanwhile, Foster and her partner were en route back to headquarters, coincidentally passing by Jacko. After Jacko boarded the plane, the flight was delayed and hadn't taken off yet. Moments later, Jacko was startled to see Foster and her partner also boarding the plane. Foster's superiors had received intelligence that the richest man in the world would be arriving in Talent in 4 days to unveil a new software he had developed. Jacko would surely be there, so Foster was ordered to change the flight route to Talent. However, in a twist of fate, Foster ended up sitting right in front of Jacko. Upon arriving, Jacko observed Foster and her partner closely. The three of them took the same taxi and even checked into the same hotel. Once inside the room, Jacko realized that this mission would be extremely difficult. He removed his disguise and began to consider whether he should change his plan. But before he could come up with a solution, the doorbell rang. 2 police officers appeared at the door, informing Jacko that a robbery had occurred upstairs and they were checking every room. Jacko calmly explained that he had just arrived and hadn't noticed anything unusual. After inspecting his passport, the male officer was about to leave, but the female officer felt something wasn't right. The female officer's instincts told her that the man before her was not simple, and she asked Jacko for his phone number and dialed it right in front of him. When the phone rang in the room, the female officer dismissed her doubts and left with her colleague. Jacko, with the instincts of a seasoned assassin, knew he couldn't stay here for long. He immediately dialed the number of a security officer who had helped him find his phone the day before. Jacko realized that the officer had different sexual preferences, and he decided to meet him, both to find a safe place to stay and to see if the officer could assist him with the mission. Never before had a top assassin had to rely on his looks to complete a mission like this. However, the assassin's target seemed very clear. He boldly got out of the car and continued to fire, but was shot down by Forster. It was a meticulously planned assassination, but fortunately, no one was injured. Forster realized the seriousness of the situation and was still shaken. She hurried into the car, leading a special forces team to the hotel. However, when they rushed in, they found no trace of Jacko. It seemed that Jacko's decision to leave the hotel the previous night had been a wise one. He had temporarily stayed at Laszlo's house, posing as a designer. Jacko expressed interest in visiting the hall in the evening, but Laszlo told him that after tonight's performance, the entire area would be completely sealed off, and no one would be allowed in or out without special clearance. Even Laszlo didn't know why. Jacko understood that he needed to act quickly. He immediately told Laszlo that his company had requested he return that night to help Jacko fulfill his mission. Laszlo had taken Jacko to the hall in the afternoon and gave him his access card so Jacko could enter the staff area. Jacko followed the directions on the blueprint, heading straight to the door that led to the rooftop, then found the special key hidden on the wall and used it to unlock the middle section of the ventilation shaft. After carefully observing, Jacko quickly returned to the lobby. Laszlo intended to invite him to dinner, but Jacko declined because he had already planned the assassination. However, an unexpected incident occurred. The backyard of Laszlo's house caught fire. Jacko's wife had always wanted to buy a restaurant, so she, along with her mother-in-law, had convinced Jacko's wife to take some money from his secret room. But Jacko's brother-in-law, who was extremely greedy, not only took the cash but also grabbed a pistol nearby. All of this was witnessed by Jacko. It seemed the problems at home had to be put on hold. He needed to focus on his mission first. That evening, Jacko said goodbye to Laszlo. Although he was filled with countless emotions, Laszlo could only watch Jacko leave. He never could have imagined that the seemingly harmless man could be the one to take his life. On the island where the richest man in the world lived, the head of security informed him that they had received intelligence about the failed attempt to apprehend the assassin in Budapest. He suggested that the richest man in the world should not go to talent, but instead hold the software launch online right here. However, after hearing this, the richest man in the world was furious. He had been preparing for this event for an entire year, and many famous personalities were expected to attend talent. If he didn't show up, wouldn't he become the laughingstock of the world? It was better to be a joke than to die. The attitude of the richest man in the world was exactly what Jacko had hoped for. By this time, he had already arrived at the hall, using his disguise to easily pass through the security checkpoint. He went to the reception desk, bought some bottled water, a few bags of nuts, and 4 chocolate bars. Halfway through the concert, Jacko stood up and left. He opened the stairway door, heading to the location he had previously surveyed. He closed the hatch, crawled into the middle layer, and waited for the appearance of the richest man in the world. Earlier, Jacko had removed his cast shoe, disassembled its parts, and assembled a sniper rifle, which he placed beside him. With 2 more days until the launch event, Jacko could rest and sleep. He quickly fell asleep, but disturbing memories resurfaced in his mind, causing him to wake up startled. It seemed that the past was a painful memory Jacko couldn't forget. Fortunately, he had met his current wife, who brought him some warmth. The next morning, as Jacko was polishing his bank card, he suddenly heard footsteps above him. Someone was coming to inspect the area, but she didn't notice anyone under the floor. Forster and her colleague also arrived at the hall. She handed a portrait of Jacko to the head of security, hoping it would help them. However, what no one expected was that, despite having sealed off the building and equipped it with the most advanced scanners, Jacko had snuck into the hall a day earlier and had been hiding in the middle layer to ensure his safety. Once again, everyone proceeded to search the entire hall. Forster even brought out C's clothes for the search dogs to sniff. Jacko was observing everything, but he wasn't worried. After enjoying a chocolate bar, he fell back asleep. This time, there were no painful memories. He dreamt of his wife. On that day, he had gathered the courage to invite her to dinner, and to his surprise, she agreed. They ended up together. Remembering his wife's beautiful face, Jacko fell asleep in tears. The long night finally passed. The software launch day arrived. Jacko began preparing to be in peak condition. He started warming up his body. Forster and her colleague also arrived at the hall and ordered another full search of the building. Everyone quickly sprang into action. Forster followed up to the roof, coincidentally standing right above Jacko, but she didn't notice anything unusual beneath her feet. Jacko sighed with relief. The richest man in the world was on his way, and the guests were arriving under the tight protection of security forces. As the host was stirring up the atmosphere, Jacko prepared to move to his sniper position. He heard security personnel walking by, pushing through the iron door to the middle layer, taking out their weapons, and quietly approaching a security guard, swiftly taking him down. He then used his bank card to slit another person's throat in the blink of an eye. At that moment, the host invited the richest man in the world onto the stage. Jacko aimed his sniper rifle in front of the television screen. The mastermind behind the plot and the supervising woman were both anxiously watching. However, assassinating the richest man in the world was not an easy task. The bulletproof glass in front of him was enough to stop any shot. What Jacko needed to do was wait for the right moment, for the enemy to let their guard down and expose themselves. However, the appearance of another sniper disrupted Jacko's plan. He quickly reloaded, preparing to shoot again, but the target had disappeared. The bodyguards surrounding the richest man in the world made it impossible for Jacko to find a shooting angle. Forster also discovered Jacko's position and quickly deployed forces to surround him. Realizing his plan had failed, Jacko decided to flee, blending into the crowd to escape. Although the police tried to close off the area, the chaotic crowd didn't give them the opportunity. In the end, Jacko slipped through the net. Seeing police cars speeding toward him, Jacko calmly walked down another street. Just when he thought he had escaped, he heard someone call his name from behind. Turning around, he saw Laszlo. At first, Jacko didn't intend to acknowledge him, but Laszlo chased after him, forcing him to face his old friend. Seeing the gentle and hopeful look in Laszlo's eyes, Jacko, in order to avoid revealing his identity, decided to take action. He killed Laszlo and watched him slowly breathe his last. Afterward, he placed Laszlo's body in an empty alcove by the roadside and quickly left. That was the price one had to pay for loving a wild horse. This gave more reason to dig into the file. Why was she so insistent on investigating a dead sniper? Foster suspected that something was wrong with Dagon and his team. Not only was the file classified at the highest level, but Dagon was also an excellent sniper. The record stated that he had died in an explosion while on a mission in Afghanistan, but it didn't mention where the body was. Perhaps this file held useful information for them. Unable to argue, her superiors had no choice but to try to get clearance for the classified documents. But what no one expected was that Foster's suspicion was correct. The top assassin Jacko was, in fact, Dagon. Not long before he changed his name to Jackal, his team received a new mission. They had heard that a high-ranking figure of a terrorist organization was attending a wedding. Their mission was to capture the target alive. After Jackal and Gary set up an ambush, their other team members arrived at the scene. Initially, they intended to negotiate peacefully to capture the target without bloodshed. But due to a language barrier, the two sides found themselves at an impasse. As the situation grew more tense, Jackal noticed someone on the hillside preparing to snipe. For the safety of his team, he was forced to take the shot. The sudden gunfire turned the scene into a battlefield. The team leader ordered all units to open fire with overwhelming firepower. This was no longer a battle. It had turned into a one-sided massacre. When everything settled down, Gary discovered that the wedding in the courtyard was just a normal one, and the target was not there. Jackal and Gary rushed over, but it was too late. After throwing a grenade, the team leader and the others stormed into the yard, shooting everyone without sparing anyone. At this point, the team leader realized it was just a regular wedding, but to cover up the massacre of civilians, before leaving, he called in an airstrike, turning the wedding scene into dust. A perfect way to destroy the evidence. The others all laughed, but the scene had left a haunting image in Jackal and Gary's minds. There was nothing clean about it. Such a mess, Gary's words saved his life. As the vehicle disappeared into the distance, Jackal silently made a decision in his heart. This was exactly what the higher-ups wanted to cover up. Time returned to the present. Me had issued a global wanted notice. Jack's wife, who happened to see the news, immediately called her sister over and pointed to the portrait on the screen, firmly stating that it was Jacko. After seeing the news, Jacko's wife panicked, ran outside, and called her husband, telling him that she had seen the news and realized he had been recognized. Jacko told his wife to remind him never to reveal this to anyone, as that was the only way to ensure the safety of their family. His wife worried that the police would come after them, but Jacko reassured her that the police didn't know his identity and had no reason to come after them. As long as she kept his secret, everything would be fine, and he would be home soon. His words made his wife realize the true identity of her husband, and for the first time in her life, she was furious with him. The danger was getting closer. Foster went to visit Larry in prison, apologizing for the death of his wife and daughter. She hoped he could forgive her, but if apologies were helpful, there would be no need for the police. Larry hated Foster to his core. Unable to take revenge, he wanted Foster to live in torment. Larry ended his life right in front of Foster. Foster, who was already on the edge, became even more panicked. Fortunately, a colleague comforted her and even brought good news that they could finally access the classified files. After signing the non-disclosure agreement, Foster opened the family records. She finally learned everything about Dagon. The file detailed that he had truly died, but she always felt something was off. Her intuition told her that Dagon was Jacko, but she couldn't understand how he had escaped. It turned out that after witnessing the killing of innocent people, Jacko came up with a bold idea. On the way back, he urgently asked his team to stop the vehicle. The others were puzzled. Jacko anxiously looked ahead, seeing a bright spot on a mound not far away, fearing that a bomb might be buried there. Trusting his teammates, everyone became alert. Jacko volunteered to go check it out. The team leader ordered one person to go with him, but Jacko insisted on Gary going with him. despite Gary's complaints. Jacko remained silent as he moved forward. He didn't know that he was saving Gary's life. Under the tense gazes of everyone, Jacko slowly advanced with a metal detector. As he neared the mound, he turned off the machine and took out a screwdriver. Don't underestimate this screwdriver. It was a tool Jacko often used to adjust his sniper rifle. It had become an extension of his palm, his skill with it surpassing any metal detector's sensitivity. Jacko carefully used the screwdriver. Jacko checked the area but didn't find anything unusual. As he approached the mound, he breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that what was behind the mound was just a children's bicycle. Seeing that it was a false alarm, the team leader ordered them to continue moving. No one noticed that Jacko had quietly taken out his phone. After confirming that everyone had gotten back into the vehicle, he pressed a button. Gary didn't understand what was happening and ran toward his teammates. Suddenly, a large explosion went off, completely destroying the vehicle carrying the special forces. Gary, panicked, tried to find the attacker. At that moment, he realized that it was Jackal's plan. But because of his earlier words, Jackal had spared him. Gary asked Jackal, "What just happened? Where do we go now?" Jackal replied, "To a place where they can't find us." From then on, the military lost a special forces operative, and the world gained a top assassin. The name Jackal came from a truck he had driven during a previous mission. Due to a mistake in the past, Jackal needed to prove his abilities and also wanted to retire with a $100 million reward. This mission was to assassinate the wealthiest person in the world. After his earlier failure, Jackal had prepared more thoroughly. If at first you don't succeed, try again, he told himself. But the wealthiest person in the world had retreated to his private island, so Jackal had to follow him. While preparing the plan, a woman overseeing the mission suddenly appeared, warning that the river software would be released in 48 hours. If the mission wasn't completed by then, they would be in big trouble. Jackal calmly replied, "I'm not on vacation." After saying this, he left decisively, showing his absolute confidence. In fact, he had just been carefully observing the surroundings of the island. Jackal discovered that the wealthiest person's security system was extremely tight. Any ship wanting to dock at the island had to undergo thorough checks. There were also drones continuously monitoring the area. However, Jackal knew that the wealthiest person had a particular hobby: swimming. This made him think that the only chance for a successful assassination would be on the sea. After successfully testing the equipment, Jackal felt more relaxed. He immediately began planning the assassination mission on the sea. However, before taking action, Jackal needed to gather more information about the target's schedule. Meanwhile, Foster continued investigating Dagon. After speaking with her superior, she was given a new mission: to track the people close to Dagon in order to find a way to approach him. Foster knew that this was her best opportunity to understand how Dagon operated and possibly uncover the secrets surrounding this target. Back with Jackal, he had figured out how to approach the wealthiest person's island. After several observations, Jackal realized that the target often went swimming at dawn in the eastern waters of the island. He decided to use a yacht to approach the area without being detected. To avoid being spotted by drones, Jackal disguised himself as a fisherman and used stabilization equipment to secure the sniper rifle. Meanwhile, Jackal's wife continued to worry about him. Although she had accepted the truth about her husband, she couldn't help but feel uneasy about the danger he faced. Before Jackal left, she took his hand and said, "Promise me, this will be the last time, right?" Jackal smiled and nodded. "I promise. After this, we'll start over." As dawn broke, Jackal took his position. He calmly observed through the scope, waiting for the target to appear. Not far off, a small patrol boat from the security force was patrolling the area, but Jackal knew how to conceal himself. Everything was under his control. At the same time, Foster received information about someone close to Dagon. She quickly deployed her team to follow, keeping the true purpose of her mission secret. The clues gradually brought her closer to a larger secret about Dagon and the underground world that Jackal was also facing. When the target appeared, Jackal steadied his rifle and aimed. However, just as he was about to pull the trigger, a loud explosion rang out from a distance. A drone crashed into the water, causing the island's security system to activate immediately. Jackal realized something was wrong. Someone else was acting on the island, and they weren't on his side. Jackal didn't have time to think for long. He quickly made a decision: complete the mission or retreat to save his life. Despite the chaos, he knew this was his only chance to prove himself and fulfill his promise to his family. Would Jackal succeed, or would he face an even more terrifying enemy than the original target? Jackal stood on the deck of the boat, his cold gaze fixed on the choppy sea. After the final shot, everything around him seemed to freeze for a few seconds. The wealthiest person in the world, the most difficult target in Jackal's career, had been taken down. But he knew that this was just the beginning of an endless chase. The remaining bodyguards on the island quickly realized what had happened. The alarm was triggered, and the pursuit team was preparing to launch. Jackal had no time to hesitate. He quickly disassembled the sniper rifle, stowed it in a waterproof bag, and then revved the boat to maximum speed. On the way out, Jackal encountered a small patrol boat from the security team. A loudspeaker blared from a distance. "Stop immediately! If not, we will open fire!" But instead of stopping, Jackal accelerated, deftly steering the boat through the large waves, making it difficult for the patrol boat to aim. He tossed a smoke grenade behind him, obscuring the opponent's view. Just when he thought he had escaped the pursuit, Jackal suddenly realized he was not alone. A helicopter appeared overhead, its searchlight shining brightly across the sea. Jackal furrowed his brow, recognizing that the pursuer was none other than Foster, the one who had always been hunting him. "Jackal, you're out of options." Foster's voice echoed through the loudspeakers. "Don't make things worse." Jackal didn't respond. He knew Foster was a smart opponent who wouldn't be easily fooled, but he also knew that to survive he needed to outsmart her. Instead of running, Jackal turned the boat toward a rocky area. Foster quickly realized his plan and ordered the helicopter pilot to adjust the position. However, the complex terrain made it impossible for them to keep up with him. At that moment, another patrol boat appeared in the distance, closing in. Jackal saw it and understood that his chances of survival were narrowing. He decided to activate the automatic boat that Norman had prepared for him earlier. The boat sped off like an arrow, leaving Jackal to jump into the water and dive deep beneath the cold waves. Foster stood on the helicopter, looking down at the area where Jackal had just disappeared. "You can't hide forever," she whispered, her eyes filled with determination. Jackal surfaced at a safe distance, gasping for air. He knew the mission was complete, but the fight for survival had only just begun. A killer like him, no matter how skilled, could never escape being hunted forever. The story ends here, leaving open questions. Will Jackal truly be able to leave his bloody past behind and start a new life with his family? Will Foster continue hunting him to the end, or is there a bigger conspiracy waiting to be revealed? Stay tuned for the next developments, if there are any. Thank you for following. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions.